Hey guys, it's Caden. Welcome to another Autism Digest interview, where today we have an amazing individual with us. I read her story on the Autism Rocks and Rolls page, and I knew I had to get her on. She's a sawman, a best-selling author, and a parent to an individual on the spectrum. She is Kerry Blaser. Thanks for coming on, Kerry.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
Of course, my first question for you is, do you mind summarizing your story in your own words?
I have three children. My son, who has mild autism, is 27 now. He has two sisters. He's the oldest. And when I had my kids, I had not healed from my childhood trauma. My parents both came from traumatic lives. My mom, who got married in 1960s, was engaged four times. My dad's parents were divorced, and then my grandma got pregnant with another man's child. They got back together. So my parents hadn't healed. And so I was raised in a very anxiety provoking. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was a workaholic. No one knew how to process their emotions. Everybody else was to blame for your problems. Use shame and guilt. And then, I was born in 1970 and raised at the time where women were taught to be men. Basically, go get a college degree, go get a job, and you're not a woman anymore. You're not feminine anymore. Go be a man. Well, what kind of children does that environment, create? Like, what did coming out of me, I had so much anxiety, had tons of cortisol in my blood, like depression. I even, 6 years ago, I attempted suicide. Like, I was a mess. And then on top of which, I'm being taught, don't be the center of the home, go work for money. So don't take care of yourself. Don't be a healthy feminine woman. Oh, and then in terms of taking care of your kids, let your baby cry it out at night as opposed to acknowledging that the mother is designed to regulate the baby's emotions. So on like numerous fronts, as a mom, I'm like hit with, bad care of self being taught, bad care of child that was taught, and mothers were taught to let babies cry it out in like the late 1800s for the Industrial Revolution so women could go work and leave their babies at daycare. Well, we all needed a wake-up call. So my son like had a nightmare time crying it out, was super clingy to me, like nursed, and I had like scabs on my breast because he was so anxious. And something it's very difficult for me to talk about, but I'm going to share just so we can like learn from experience, right? And there's studies now showing that when a mother has high cortisol levels and our blood has high stress, much more likely to have an autistic child. So after Ethan was born, I remember one time he was like in a carrier about 2 months old, and I felt drawn to like throw him over the balcony. I'm like, what the, like he just wanted to die. Like his soul was like, this is too much. I had another urge to like take a knife, like take scissors in his heart. Like, I'm like, what is, and before I accepted all of my psychic gifts and everything, I talked to like a really kind of experienced shaman, and she's like, "No, that was him. He didn't want to be here because it was so friggin' hard." And I would say that that's kind of the summary of my story with my son who has autism. And then I have a daughter who has an eating disorder. And then I learned through that whole experience that when you have a child with autism, you're much more likely to have a child with an eating disorder.
Oh, I was gonna ask. Well, it was first like finding out your son was on the spectrum, but you answered that beautifully. That was incredibly deep, and I agree. A lot of the world's issues now is a generational thing. I'm 21 years old, and I'm dealing with a world that my parents and the older generation left me. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying about certain things being a generational problem, which leads
Yeah.
to my next question for you. What were some of the most transformative moments in understanding your child's needs, communication style, or sensory world?
School. School. And so here's what was hard. So my son's 27. He has mild autism and he's super accomplished. Like he's an Eagle Scout and a second degree black belt in Taekwondo. However, he graduated from a highly special needs high school. Like, if he can become an Eagle Scout, the young man should be able to graduate from a regular high school, but not in today's schools. So I think that autism, especially like in 2003 when he started kindergarten, was super, like they didn't know what to do. He could do math problems no other kid could even think about, but yet he was hitting other kids. And so now the school district's dealing with a situation where, yes, the child has autism, but also the parents have unhealed trauma, and the school district can't say anything because if they say anything, then they're responsible for paying for the bills. So, a huge problem in the school district is that if they point out, oh, your son's autistic, they just made themselves responsible for your son's medical bills. So then how can we communicate if they can't be honest? And so, he got in and then like he started hitting kids. And so then we put him in a Montessori. But then that was working out, but then how do we afford that? So we found another kindergarten, much smaller. It worked out. We got him there. But then, come first grade, he can't sit and attend. Okay, so medicate. Our schools are designed to sit still. Little boys are designed to act. Little girls can sit still, but they need to surrender to their emotions and not be in their left brain all day long with knowledge and logic and planning, which is what school is. So on both fronts, we're not meeting the needs, the biological needs of children. And so Ethan, I used to take him out like before he would go to the afternoon kindergarten. So I'd take him to the YMCA and let him run around and climb and swim and, get it out. And then my daughters would come too, and they were all born within 4 years. They're very close together. But it was very difficult. And then I had tons of relationship problems, and I got a divorce, and Ethan had problems, and I didn't know how to draw boundaries. And my ex-husband was so busy punishing me and claiming to be the better parent that, he just was nice to the kids and blamed me for everything. So I would say that, you know, I, people born with autism are getting hit on multiple fronts because we don't know what we're doing on multiple fronts. We don't know what we're doing with healthy kids, with kids without, a neurological challenge. So then kids come with a neurological challenge that makes it even more difficult. Adults aren't admitting how much trauma we have that women working full time has like created a situation where 60% of adults do not have a secure attachment to self. Basically, they're mentally ill. 50% of kids also do not have a secure attachment to self. Teachers are leaving left, right, and center because kids don't know how to behave in a basic way at school. There's no parent in the home. So I would say, yeah, there's a lot of challenges to confront, but school is where that really became clear. But at 5, like I have pictures of Ethan in his little Taekwondo uniform at 5 years old, So Taekwondo was helpful for him. Rock climbing was helpful. Boy Scouts, I did that from the time he was 7 or 8, super helpful. So I tried to get him around healthy structure with healthy relationships. And one thing that I would say the biggest help for Ethan was that he met his best friend who was 2 days older than him. And they were 5 years old. And he's an Eagle Scout too. And they are still super close. So, yeah.
You brought up a good point just now. There's definitely some challenges in the education system, especially within special education. I can speak for this myself. Well, my school experience was somewhat okay. I had a lot of teachers who cared, and I was able to graduate early on Valentine's Day, specifically, to be exact. My experiences in school definitely weren't perfect. There were still some stigmatizations, and I got myself into a couple of bullying situations where I was the victim. But I believe, like you're saying, it all starts in the home. If
It
there's no
does.
parent in the home, or if there's a negative parent or abusive parent in the home, those behaviors are going to rub off on the child. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Which leads to my next question.
Okay.
You're a shaman. Do you feel that semantic principles such as energy awareness, presence, or intuitive listening help you better understand neurodivergent communication or behavior?
100%. So I was lucky enough this morning to be on like a small Zoom call with Dr. Bruce Lipton. Dr. Bruce Lipton is the grandfather of epigenetics. People used to think that everything happened because it was just in our genetics. Epigenetics means the epi means before genetics. So what happens before our physiology, our biology? Well, that's the energy, that's our souls. So physicists have proven that we all have energy bodies or souls. And even like Einstein says that the field controls the matter, and the field is the energy field. Okay, so this is where we really have to dial it back to the beginning, to really where it really starts. It doesn't start with the body, it starts with the soul. So souls vibrate at different frequencies, and those are our different emotions, with shame, guilt, and fear being, below 100 hertz, courage being about 200 hertz, love about 500 hertz, enlightenment is 700 to 1,000 hertz. So, one challenge that my son and I had is that my nervous system was calibrated to resonate, meaning a vibrational match. My energy field was fear, guilt, and shame. So, when you bring a child into that energy field, then their nervous system is immediately super challenged, right? And now, like Ethan, most people wouldn't know that Ethan even has autism. So he's not even moderate and not even severe. I mean, people who are in the know go, oh, there's a little something there. Something's going on. But because my nervous system was calibrated in those very lower vibrating emotions, that's not healthy. That's when you get cancer and autoimmune diseases and all other kind of diseases that come out of the body because the body's in an energy field that's super wounded with fear, guilt, and shame. So what I had to learn through my own healing practice, my own healing from my own childhood trauma of the past 10 years, that when I transform my wounds into wisdom, and I'll give an example in a second, I am recalibrating my nervous system to resonate with love, compassion, and enlightenment as opposed to fear, guilt, and shame. Now, I still have to be able to go into my fear, guilt, and shame, but I don't live there like I did for most of my life, and I'm 55 now. So here's an example of turning your wounds into wisdom. About 8 years ago, after I started healing, my youngest daughter and I got in an argument, and I was wrong and I needed to apologize, but it wouldn't come out. Like I didn't know how in this right brain feminine activity, forgiveness is right brain feminine activity. I didn't know how to do it at 48 years old. I was messed up. So I asked myself, and I had finally kind of learned to like ask my subconscious, my shadow, my wounds, like, what's up? So I asked myself, why can't I apologize to my daughter? And what I heard was that I said, you're afraid that if you apologize, she will leave you. I'm like, well, that's not logical because if I have the capacity to apologize, that's healthy relationship, then she wants to stay. I'm like so that's illogical. Let's turn that logical. Logical means I apologize, then she stays. So that's the wisdom in it. So I called her up, I apologized, and everything was great. And so it was like, wow, I have all of this illogical crap in my subconscious because that's what I internalized from my parents. My mom never knew how to apologize. She used shame, guilt, and fear to control people. And my dad would just go to work and leave you. So, I would say as adults, have a lot to learn about how to love ourselves properly and then love our children properly because there's always this rule that when children are 7 and older, then can go with the dad. Well, why is that? Well, the first 7 years, the mother and the baby, the child, are biologically designed for her nervous system to help regulate the child's nervous system and for her to kind of teach the child how to do it in a healthy way. Well, if the mom doesn't know how to do it, what's the child gonna do, you know? So this is where adults, we call it reparenting ourselves. We need to recalibrate our nervous systems for love, compassion, and enlightenment, turn those wounds into wisdom so that we're not resonating with fear, guilt, and shame, which so many people do these days.
I absolutely agree. I think not just with trauma, but with anything, it starts with working on yourself, and then and only then can you teach others or have a say in other people's feelings or insecurities.
Yeah.
Which
Mhm.
leads to my last question for you. How do you balance honoring your spiritual interpretations with respecting the science and lived reality of autism? You've touched on that a lot throughout this interview, but do you mind expanding on what you said?
Wow, that's a great question. See, my son lives in Minnesota and I'm in California right now. And so I'm not like confronted with autism day in, day out like I used to. And I would say when I was dealing with it, when he was in high school and still living at home, I wasn't aware of the spiritual nature. But what I would like to say that I definitely think that souls that choose the path of autism came in to show us that we are very mentally ill because autistic people are more sensitive and are very perceptive. And like Ethan is super psychic, super smart, super perceptive. So, and when you're perceptive, when your soul is perceptive, that means you receive a lot of information, and that's the sensitive, right? And so if all this information going out right now, like, we're on our phones, human bodies aren't designed to make the amount of decisions and have the amount of incoming information that we have right now. And so that's why we're breaking down. We're just too disconnected from nature. And that's our nervous system, right? So when we're super disconnected from ourselves, then that's like cities, more liberal than the countryside. Okay, there's a lot of science now showing that mental illness is much like twice or three times as prevalent amongst the progressive liberal population than it is amongst the conservatives. So if you think about that, they're disconnected from nature. That's the problem. And even now you have doctors globally, because they do all the research on it, are prescribing not medication for depression and anxiety. Walk barefoot in nature, hug a tree. Are they're prescribing time in nature to heal. It used to be like old shamanic wisdom, because I'm a shaman. Used to be if someone had anxiety or depression, the shaman would say, well, when's the last time you danced? When's the last time you were in nature? When's the last time you were joyful? When's the last time you were happy? When is the last time you calibrated your nervous system for love, compassion, and enlightenment? Is, basically what the shaman was asking. That was, before we had science and physics and everything, but neurology and neuroscience. But that's really the only kind of problem we have is how we're calibrating our nervous system and then the downstream impacts, positive or negative.
I absolutely agree, and I heard about the prescription nature thing. My stepmom's also into that deep spiritual stuff, and see, once read an article about how doctors are prescribing walking in nature here.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. It's exactly what society needs, and that's a perfect way to end this interview. Anyways, that's going to do it for this interview, guys. Thanks so much to Kerry for coming on and sharing her story. If you guys want to see more amazing interviews, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Autism Digest channel. Pick yourself up our latest issue that looks something like this. You can get it by going to autismdigest.com, and stay tuned for the audio file to be posted on our Spotify. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.